Welcome back. Today we're going to spend some time with the BLON BL-05S. The S version, in case you don't know, is the follow-up to the much maligned regular BL-05, which most people said was too bright, too screechy, trebles too hot, too recessed. It had a host of problems, so it didn't actually sell all that well. So then came along a retuned mint green BL-05S, and we're going to talk about that today. But first, I want to thank the Better Audio store on Amazon for shipping this out to me. If you look on Amazon US today, it's $50.99, and there is a $4 coupon, which kind of puts you in the ballpark of what it is on AliExpress. So again, thank you, Better Audio store, for shipping that out to me. So let's get into the BLON BL-05S. And you almost have to start with number one, this accessory curse. So even starting with the 03, the tips were just not good. The cable kind of worked, but the tips just didn't work at all. And it's got this weird nozzle size. So in order to get the best sound out of the 03, you really needed to have another pair of tips. And it's kind of a shame because people buy it, you expect it to work out of the box. When it doesn't, people start returning it and they're not happy. So lots of time spent telling people to change your tips on the 03 to make it sound well. The 05 wasn't as bad. I think it was the same tips and probably the same cable, and I didn't use either one of those as well. But on the 05S, I'm not even going to say try to use the ones in the box. I would just put them aside, throw them in a drawer, don't bother. So specifically, a couple weeks ago on Audio Reviews, the Facebook group, Larry Fulton, who tuned the 05S, contributed to the tuning of the 05S, said, try a silver cable. And it just so happened I had a silver cable on order from AliExpress. This is the KB Ear Limpid cable. This is with that 99.9% pure silver cable. Fun fact about this cable, if you have an LG phone and use the high impedance mode using a small extension on your headphone jack, not triggered by this silver cable for some reason. Just noticed that, but a little fun fact. So silver cable, he said, it really brings everything to life, and I 100% agree. So second, tips. People have been talking about these ASLA Sedna ear fit tips. People talked about it on Audio Reviews, the Facebook group, on HeadFi. I see mentioned all the time, and I kind of gave in and just bought them because I knew I was already getting a cable. These actually fit really well, and specifically, they are wide bore, and let me show you what really happened. So this is the Sedna ear fit, and this is a normal KZ star tip. And if you look at kind of the bore holes, the Sedna ear fit is huge compared to the star tip. And if you had asked me 2 weeks ago, do you want a BLON BL-05 with a huge wide bore and a silver cable, I would have said no, it's going to be way too bright. But so these are kind of magical ear tips. I really like these, and most of all, they bring out the bass without the resonance. And that's kind of what I most noticed about them is the bass. I always thought wide bore would really cut down on the amount of bass, but not so much on these, and the resonance is definitely something that helps on these 05Ss. So yes, the accessory curse still lives on the 05S. You most definitely, I would highly suggest a silver cable. This one on AliExpress, it's about $20. It goes down to, I think, about $16 on promo. These ear fit tips cost me $13. So you're almost doubling the price of, it's about $33. This one on AliExpress was about $35, $10 more on Amazon. So yeah, you're basically going to double the price to make it sound like it should, but worth it. So number two, the BLON BL-03 or the 05. Where did this thing come from? And most people just assume that it's an 05. It really, should really belong about right here. It should sound just like the 05, maybe a little tweak. But if you actually go back and look, and I will actually post a link to the story on Audio Reviews where where the S model actually came about, where the tuning came about, and you'll see this graph that basically says, oh, all three of them sound really similar. They graph very similar. I think that was sort of a problem with the 05S was people just make assumptions. The graph, the name, the timing, all these things basically pushed a lot of people's view and say, oh, it's really just a retuned 05, but it's really not. Go back and read the story, and it's really much closer to the 03 in sound. And if you kind of ignored that story, ignored that graph, and just put the right tips on and the right cable, it's very reminiscent of the 03. There's a lot of DNA on the 03 that comes through on the 05S. And I don't see too many people review-wise mentioning it, but it is. When you set it up correctly, it very much reminds you of the 03. So number 3, no more recessed vocals. So one of my biggest issues on the 05 were the vocals. They were really recessed and thin. This whole midsection was just really thin and recessed at the same time. It was a double problem. And so on the 05S, not really a problem anymore. It's not 100% where it should be for me. You'll still catch a couple songs or two where it sounds recessed, and I don't think you can say it's 100% there to the 03, but it's a good 90% better than what it was. You just don't have those thin vocals anymore. And if you want to kind of run through a song with 3 vocals, Hello, Good Morning, the remix, 3 different vocals, 2 males, 1 female, kind of all in a row. I thought, not so much a vocal test as much a cool song with a bunch of vocals. So check that one out. But yeah, generally, it's not nearly as recessed, and the vocals are fuller and richer where they should be, much closer to the 03. So number 4, more bass and more warmth. So another problem with the 05 was that the mids were so lean, there was just no bleed there at all. And as a result, it didn't really have any warmth at all. So with the 05S, lots more bass, lots more warmth, and Selena Gomez, Vulnerable, a song that we talked about. John 995, I think, threw this one out to me when we were doing the ZSN Pro X with the tape mod, which kind of is, it's kind of a variation of this problem of we had something that was really bright and we put a tape mod on it to bring all the uppers down, and you end up with a song like that where her voice, there's just a lot of warmth and a lot of detail to it. And in this particular song, her voice starts off really sharp and processed, and it kind of transitions into this natural, warm singing voice. And it's really nice just to hear that whole transition through the song on the 05S's. And it's, it's that combination of bass and warmth, really nice. So the uppers are in check on the 05S. So same problem on the 05 regular. It was really bright. The uppers were really harsh. So I would call these the uppers in check. One of those songs that I pull out is Faithless Mass Destruction. You can jump to 140 or not jump to 140, but it's kind of overwhelming on a very bright set. And when you get all those uppers in check and his voice comes through and there's enough warmth in his voice because it's kind of deep, it sounds really, really nice. And, if you can get by all the obnoxious sound coming through and listen to his voice, really good on the 05S. So let's talk about those more in detail. So I would call it musical like the 03. It's more detailed like the 05, but it's cohesive and natural like a normal dynamic driver should be. Everything that we talked about on the 03, this cohesive, natural, organic, homogeneous sound is what you get on the 05S, and not so much what we got on the 05 regular. So again, it's just shifted. It's way closer to the 03 than it is to the 05. So the bass, it's still less than the 03. It's a little more, it's way more than the 05, especially in the sub bass, which this had not too much of, but it's faster. This new 3rd generation driver is just faster and a little harder hitting. When I complained about the 03 being just a tad soft and not quite as sharp as I would like, the 05S fixes that. It's just faster. When everyone complained about the 03 being, having this slow bass, faster in the 05S. So I think that fixed a lot of people's problems as well. So for me, that speed increase, it works on more genres, not as sub-focused as the 03, a lot more mid. And for me, that kind of brings in some faster EDM type music, which is what I listen to half the time. And if you want something good example of the range of basses, Kygo's Hot Stuff, kind of a new song, new spin on an older song. Took a disco beat and added a lot of bass to it, but sounds really nice. There's just a lot of nice bass going on the 05S. So the mid's warm and full like the 03. It's kind of what I talked about before. It's just not the 05. There's nothing other than a little bit of the recessed vocals. There's just not much there. That should remind you of the 05. It should be much closer to the 03. But the detail and the clarity, that's probably closer to the 05, but not recessed and thin. So for me, the vocals are the thing that changed the most on the 05S, because they were, like I said, with the 05 review, the mids on their own, just hearing voices, wasn't all that great. It was my least favorite part of the whole set. Not a problem on the 05S. So it really has that right balance of warmth, but enough clarity and details to shine through. And that's how I would describe this sound. Is it's not super hyper detailed like a hybrid. It's detailed, but there's nothing clouding that. There's just clarity. All these details just pop through without having to focus on it. When you talk about Adele's Hello, and everyone knows that she kind of inhales a little bit on every line. So on some IMs, you hear it once or twice. It's not too noticeable. On here, you could pretty much, without thinking about it, without focusing on it, you'll just hear her inhale. And I would call those details shining through, as opposed to, oh, I never heard that before. I heard all these things before, but they're just right there in plain view, not veiled, not hidden, not hard to focus on. So details there shining through. So this song, Love Will Take You, by Angus Stone. Angus and Julia Stone is, I think, properly who wrote that. So listen to, it's two people, Angus and Julia Stone, singing kind of on top of each other. She'll be a little in front, he's kind of in back a little lower, and you'll get this huge vocal image. And that's what was missing on the 05, was everything was recessed and thin. So now you get this big vocal image, two voices singing at the same time, lots of detail there, but it's just all there in focus. And then as the instruments start popping in, they're like all around your head, but you never lose focus on this strong vocal image. And that's exactly what the 03 was. It was sort of a master at those vocals, and the 05S is right there as well. And so again, the just detailed warm vocals, the sharp drum in the beginning, the smooth strings pop in, lots of detail. On the shaker, you'll sort of realize that it's not a hybrid, hyper detailed beast. Sounds good, but it's not super detailed, not hyper detailed. And the soundstage of just having their vocal image here, all the sounds around you, is very much this immersive, wide, very engaging soundstage that you had on the 03. And the 05S is really close to it. I wouldn't say it's better than the 03, but it's really, really close. Much, much closer than the 05 ever was. So the treble extended and in balance with the bass now. And that was what I tried to do on the 05, tips and cable, trying to get, cut down some of this brightness on the right side and get some bass, so they were sort of in balance. You don't have that problem on the 05S because they brought the treble down a little bit, the bass is up a little bit, everything is now in balance, everything is cohesive. It just sounds really good. So I wouldn't say the treble kind of blew me away, because it's actually very polite with restraint, and it adds some nice shine and realism. But the thing you really notice is it's very much like the 03. It's just in balance, and you just don't have those peaks. Everything is organic and natural. The 05S is just about there with the 03, but with just a little bit more treble, because that was the complaint on the 03. So Caliban's Dream, Underworld, it's not like the strings are soaring like I've never heard them before, but everything is just in balance. There's a nice low end, there's a nice high end. Nothing pops out at you like, oh, that's kind of cringeworthy. it just sounds generally nice. It's very musical. You sort of forget about the two halves of the graph and just think about the music. It's just musical like the 03. Soundstage, it should remind you of the 03, not the 05. The 05 wasn't all that great on soundstage. The staging was kind of okay, but it's not nearly as good as the 03. So it's wide and immersive, engaging. You know, if you're going to nitpick it, it needs a little more. Height is what I would say. Depth, not as much, but height would have been nice. So engaging, but I think it's still edged out by the 03, but really, really close. I mean, close enough anyway. So that's my take on the 05S. Again, I highly, highly suggest a silver cable, some better tips. I actually used it with the star tips. It's not horrible. What I noticed most was the bass has to come through. If you're not getting bass through your tips on the 05S, it's just going to sound like this, which was bass light. There's a lot of bass here. You have to find the right tips that bring it out. And for me, the ear fits were the ones that sort of brought out the bass, but not as much resonance. It kind of kept that bass level just in check, just below the mids. Still allowed enough bleed through to add enough warmth, and it was just right. So again, that's it. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.